have you all here and with us. I'm Rabbi Metz, and we are just thrilled to continue to open our doors to our community and to be supporting Israel, for us to be learning, and most importantly, for us to be joining together. And I want to say just a few quick, big, very important thank you to Todah Rabah. And I want to say, of course, thank you to Marty Johnson, that I'll call in a moment. Thank you so much, Professor Graizbord, for putting everything together, for your open heart, for your intelligence, for your wisdom, for your friendship, for your partnership. Thank you. I want to say a big thank you to all of our staff at Congregation Anshei Israel who made all of this happen, and our maintenance staff who is just truly incredible. Thank you. Along with Marty and along with Professor Graizbord, also want to say a big thank you to Paul Patterson and to all of those who are helping to keep us safe and who have made sure that we here can have a caring, kind, understanding, wonderful place for us all to be and to learn. And I'm just so, so grateful. Thank you so much. And I'd like to call Marty Johnson, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marty Johnston, and I wear many different hats. My work hat is here at Anshei Israel at the front desk, where for the last 2 years I have worked as the afternoon receptionist. A couple of months ago I took off my work hat and I put on my friend hat, and I asked Rabbi Metz and Deborah Lytle, our executive director, if I could organize a lecture. They said yes, but I needed to do it wearing my congregant hat. A lot of balancing of hats. Professor Graizbord and I put back on our friend hats and sat down over tea and coffee and worked out the logistics, and we are now here. Before I read the official bio, let me just say that Professor Graizbord, that David, is both a dear friend and a brilliant scholar. His work, Understanding Jewish Identity, has so many contemporary applications, including understanding anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And now for the bio. David Graizbord, a historian, is professor of Judaic Studies and director of the Arizona Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Arizona. At Arizona, David teaches numerous courses in pre-modern and modern Jewish history, as well as the history of the Iberian Atlantic, the Spanish Inquisition, and the history and phenomenology of anti-Semitism. He is the author of 3 books and various articles and chapters in edited collections. His latest books are The New Zionists, Young American Jews, Jewish National Identity and Israel, 2020, and Early Modern Jewish Civilization, Unity and Diversity in a Diasporic Society, an introduction, that was 2024. Just wanted to say thank you again to all the community partners who helped us publicize the event, and for everyone who has come out for this very, very important workshop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marty, very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi Metz. Thank you, Congregation Anshei Israel. This turnout is really fantastic. I think we have Marty and Anshei Israel. Thanks for that. It's nice to see both familiar faces and unfamiliar faces. As Marty alluded to, I originally envisioned this as a small, intimate workshop, but there's so many of you that I'm afraid I can't run it quite like a workshop. I think I'm simply going to ask questions as I go, and I hope that you won't be shy about answering them. I don't pretend that I have all the questions, much less all the answers. I think several of you know already my positions or can guess them accurately, but I'm fundamentally not here to preach or to convince you of anything. I'm simply here to stimulate your thinking, and hopefully to encourage you to do a couple of things that I'll outline in a moment. Okay, so let's see if my slide advancer works. Actually, I won't press it just yet. Let's start with a question, okay? This is called, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? by show of hands, how many of you lean currently in the direction of saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? Wow, that's quite a majority. Okay, how many of you lean in the direction of saying that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism? Okay, that's a quorum, okay. How many of you, and by the way, people can answer more than once, okay? How many of you say, I don't know? Okay, that's also a bit of a smaller quorum. How many of you would say, it depends? Okay, all right, good. Okay, that's actually very good. I was afraid that we would have too much of a consensus already from the beginning. For those of you who already have a leaning, not necessarily a definitive leaning, but a leaning in one way or another, would you care to share why you're here, particularly if you already kind of know what your opinion is? Yes, go ahead.
Because Dr. Graizbord, I always appreciate hearing anything you have to say.
Oh. I paid him a couple $. And by the way, he is one of the smartest people in town. Go down, please.
Well, I think the Jewish people worldwide are facing existential risk.
Okay.
Just do the trend line, in 20 years there will be pogroms. So we have to be united and do something about it.
Okay, I'm such a problem. I too worry about a lot of things. This talk will not completely solve the worry. So, let's see if this works. Maybe it doesn't. Okay. So I may have to just.
Oh, there we go.
What is it? Oh, okay.
Oh, David,
So,
it was
yeah.
the
It's just
mark.
a little bit slow. So, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? What's the answer? The answer.
Hell yeah.
I would say, keep an open mind and read across the spectrum. Right?
David,
Yes.
I'm pushing the button.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Just like a little bit like the Wizard of Oz. So next one, yeah. I say make up your own mind. Don't be sort of too swayed by the vortex of people's opinions. if you don't mind, don't look at social media. Social media traffics in dopamine. It doesn't traffic in information. So whatever you think, don't make it based on that. Okay, the next. This is an important one, okay? I think as adults, we owe it to ourselves to understand that life is complex. Yes, there are black and white situations. Yes, we can decide what is right, what is wrong. But by and large, as I told Mr. Patterson some time ago in just a conversation, my job as an educator, and I'm not any kind of activist, as an educator, is to encourage my students to hold more than one opinion, more than one idea in their minds simultaneously. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind or that the ideas have to be contradictory, but you do, I think, owe it to yourselves, as if we owe it to all to ourselves as adults, to find the grays, to find complexity. Okay, Marty, please let's move ahead. Okay, so if you want to just push the button a number of times, Marty, this is a list of resources that I put together for you. I was going to make massive numbers of copies to give to all of you. I didn't have time, so what I would like to do is just tell you to contact me or contact Anshei Israel, and I'll be happy to provide you with this list, okay? Both people who say anti-Semitism is, for all intents and purposes, anti-Zionism and vice versa, and those who say, no, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are two different things. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so my agenda here is very simple. First, I'm going to draw out some definitions. That's because we have to understand, or at least you have to understand what I'm talking about, even if you define the key terms differently than I do. Secondly, yes, I'm going to describe the phenomena that attend to these definitions. And lastly, I'm going to suggest, if we get to it, it's a long program. If we get to it, I'm going to offer an explanation, a multifactorial explanation for some of the phenomena. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what is anti-Jewish sentiment. Notice I'm not saying anti-Semitism. What is anti-Jewish sentiment? I define it as negative and hostile perceptions and behavior that is directed towards Jews, or what is considered to be Jewish, or people who are considered to be Jews, right? And Jewish culture. It is also the refusal to accept Jews collectively as normal. In other words, somebody who harbors anti-Jewish opinions might say, well, some of my best friends are Jewish or something like that. It doesn't mean that that person is, is immune from harboring some negative opinions of Jews as a collectivity. Next. Jews' collective culture and identity, according to those who harbor ill will towards Jews, according to them, it has something basically illegitimate, objectionable, and distasteful. Right? How objectionable, how distasteful really varies according to the bigot, but nevertheless, this is, I think, where most anti-Jewish opinions concur. Next. Okay. Now, what is anti-Semitism? Antisemitism is a word that is now used broadly to describe any form of anti-Jewish animosity in any period of history. Strictly speaking, that's not correct. That's not very accurate. Anti-Semitism is a specific form of racism that developed in the 19th century. And it accompanied the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution, and that is partly why it still does use the trappings and the language of the hard natural sciences, as well as the soft social sciences, and it is usually expressed, was in the 19th century, but even today is expressed in terms of mass politics, and usually it's articulated in the language of political virtue, political progress. So very often, anti-Semites from the 1880s onward will use words like the popular will and the liberation of the masses and human and national rights and so forth. This is part of the lexicon of anti-Semitism, which is essentially a mass political ideology. Now, why did the purveyors of anti-Semitism, who, by the way, were very proud of the fact that they were anti-Semitic in the 19th century, why did they use science, both social science and natural science? Well, mostly because they wanted to present themselves as rational individuals, people who were intelligent, decent, and therefore respectable, people who were, who were up with, they were in with the program, right? They were up to date. In other words, they didn't inherit some religious prejudices. They didn't believe necessarily that one ought to hate Jews because, quote unquote, they killed Jesus or anything like that. No, they wanted to say that they had a scientific, an empirical basis for their objection to Jews. Specifically, the purveyors of modern anti-Semitism sought to disenfranchise Jews in some fashion, to kick them out of clubs, to bar them from the opera, to remove the vote when it had been granted to them, to prevent them from becoming full citizens where they had not become full citizens, etc. The man pictured here is is there such a word as the coiner, the person who coined the word anti-Semitism, a German publicist who shared with his peers what they called Judenhasse, or Jew hatred, but he wanted to give this anti-Jewish position of his the patina, if you will, of scientific respectability. So he borrowed concepts from linguistic anthropology to argue not that there are simply Semitic cultures and non-Semitic cultures, but that there are Semitic races and other races, for example, the Aryan race, okay? Now, believe you me, there is no such thing as a Semitic race. So anytime I hear somebody say something about, having a Semitic nose, I go, well, you just swallowed this guy's stuff. Okay? So, again, the idea was to give anti-Semitism, of which Wilhelm Marx was very proud to give it the imprimatur of science. Okay, next. All right. Now, we tend to associate anti-Semitism, modern anti-Semitism, with the hard political right, with people like Wilhelm Marr, and of course, ultimately the Nazis. However, in the 19th century, also in the 20th century, this was very much a widely shared position on Jews. Here, for example, we see the statements of two gentlemen who formed the ideological foundations of, on the left, socialist anarchism, and on the right, what is still called scientific socialism. The first is Jacques Fourier. He wrote The New Industrial and Social World in 1829, and he argued, quote, "The Jews, with their commercial morality, are they not the leprosy and perdition of the body politic?" Notice the recourse to quasi-scientific or pseudo-scientific language, right? The language of disease rather than of religion or theology. Okay, Marx, who was born into a Jewish family, but whose father converted to Lutheranism in order to be able to practice law in Prussia, and who, therefore baptized the young Marx, wrote the following, quote, "In the final analysis, the emancipation of the Jews is the emancipation of mankind from Judaism." Okay, for Marx, Jews as a group, almost as an abstraction, embodied everything that was wrong with society in his view. For him, Jews were the arch-capitalists, the super greedy, the embodiment of everything that was wrong and needed to change in the world for it to become free. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I have to warn you about anti-Semitism as a phenomenon. I've quoted three people who were quite radical in their dislike of Jews. However, number one, not all forms of anti-Jewish animus, be they anti-Semitic or not, were eliminationist. Not every anti-Semite said, Jews have got to be purged from society. No, some of them said, no, it's fine that they have the vote, it's fine that they're now called citizens. We just don't want them to lord over everybody. We just don't want them to, to be too uppity. Okay, next. Now, the fact that we usually, as citizens today, we learn about anti-Semitism through the lenses of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, usually means that a lot of the more genteel forms of anti-Jewish animus are obscured. Okay, now I'll define those terms in a moment. Next. Some forms of anti-Jewish animosity, of anti-Semitism, properly speaking, display some tolerance. Again, I mention those who, like Heinrich von Treitschke, a famous, German patriot and historian and economist, who argued, Jews can be very good citizens. It's just that they're not likely to be good citizens. So we have to understand that they cannot be proper Germans. They can never be us, the Germans. Yes. Now, all anti-Semites and many post-anti-Semitic thinkers and writers all propose, or at least hint at a quote-unquote solution to what in the 19th century was called the Jewish question. And the Jewish question is essentially a political, social, and cultural question. Do the Jews fit in a general non-Jewish society? And if so, how do they fit? Right? So again, some said, well, they fit, but not as type A people. Some said, no, they don't fit at all. And as you know, the Nazis answered in the radical negative. Not only do they not deserve a place in society, they simply cannot be tolerated, and either they have to be excised from society or they have to be physically eliminated, because if they remain, they will poison the body politic. Next. Now, in any case, whether the anti-Semite is a quote-unquote moderate or a radical or somewhere in between, there is a broad consensus that Jews must concede something that they, or at least most of them, consider to be valuable to them and basic to themselves. Okay, in other words, Jews are not acceptable as is, right? There's no such thing as the perfect equality of the, the American Declaration of Independence, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. No. Not all men are created equal. Some own society, and some, therefore, have a right to tell others what they must do to be part of society. Okay? Let's just be clear about it. All right. So, what do I mean by genteel bigotry? Let's sample this statement by our former president, poor man who just got diagnosed with aggressive cancer. He said about his boss, Barack Obama, I mean, you got the first mainstream African American who's articulate, bright and clean, and nice looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man. How's my impression? Terrible. Okay. So this is what I mean by genteel bigotry. So, oh, here's a black dude. Oh, he's clean. Whoa. Nice. Okay. Next. Now, since we're talking about forms of bigotry, whether they're anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic specifically, I think it's important to understand bigotry in the broad sense. Bigotry has a tendency to, next item, to betray its irrational foundations. Next. First, it is a highly discriminatory form of discourse, right? It discriminates against X as a group, against people with blue eyes, against people with dark skin, against people who hold X politics, whatever, okay? It is also usually very contradictory and obsessive. In other words, the bigot seldom can be talked out of the fervor with which he or she embraces the bigotry. Next. The style of bigotry, especially in these, social media drenched days, is highly polemical, ultra rhetorical. This is what is you might say colloquially known as trolling, right? People like to troll. Some days ago, I asked my staff to put, my department staff to put a notice on our social media about an upcoming talk by my colleague and dear friend Leonard Hammer. And we got something like 129 thumbs up from even some people in this room. And we got something like 300 trolls. Some were probably bots, but many of them were probably just very ill people somewhere in middle America out there who wanted to let me know, or wanted my department to know, that Jews are just horrible, that we want to destroy everything, that we are, ape-like, that we eat children for breakfast, and that we especially hate Arabs and want to do them harm, and that's the basis of our politics. Yeah. So there's that. Next. Bigotry has a very strident tone. It is often outraged. It is often tearful. Now, Marty saw an early version of this, and he said, "Why do you use the word lachrymose? What are you, some sort of pedantic fool?" So I changed it to tearful. This means that people who are, notice the demonstrations, right? Of any political, hue. If they're very, very emotional, I'm not saying that people are wrong to be emotional. Sometimes it's very justified, but I can tell you that those who are bigoted are usually very, very emotional. Screw you! You're killing the baby! You're killing the kids! Okay, next. These bigots are usually fixated on whatever the accuser's ideology considers to be the worst possible thing in the world. Next item. The worst thing about society and life. So, for example, Marx. What was wrong with the body politic? Well, the Jewishness of the body politic, the materialism, the capitalistic, greed in the body politic. For the capitalists, what was wrong with the body politic? Wow, is these awful Bolsheviks, these radical, weird, workers who just want to destroy the good, the bourgeoisie, and who don't understand value and who just want handouts. These Bolsheviks. These are what the Jews represent. If you are, you're an anti-racist, then what are Jews? Well, they're a bunch of racists. They're white. Yeah. What if you're a, I don't know, whatever. You name it, right? Whatever you wish to define as the worst thing about a society, that is what you define, that is what you classify as Jewish. There's a very good book, by the way, by David Nuremberg, whom I invited to town some years ago, called Anti-Judaism. And he calls it Anti-Judaism, the Western tradition. I think he makes a compelling argument that in Western society, at least, there has been a tendency to Judaicize that which one feels is unacceptable, right? In other words, it's not that people who hate Jews are actually talking about real life Jews of blood and bones. They've created chimeras to explain to themselves what is wrong with society. Anyway, so bigotry tends to be sweeping, essentialistic, and totalizing. And this again defies the counter-argument, oh, but some of my best friends are Jewish, right? Because ultimately it's the Jewish problem that has to be solved, the Jewish state that has to be attacked, the Jewish this, the Jewish that. It's a very broad sweep of the brush. Yes, next one. Also, bigotry relies on crude and specious reasoning, okay? What do I mean by this? By crude reasoning, I mean simplistic reasoning. Yeah, that's a very Manichaean way of thinking. These people are absolutely bad. They are irredeemably bad. Blacks are unbelievably stupid. Mexicans are unbelievably, lazy. Women cannot drive if they get paid for it. Whatever the heck you're thinking is absolute, right? It's a very simplistic way of thinking. It lends itself to emotional excess. Okay, next. There's a lot of tendentious misunderstanding here, a lot of distortion, okay? I once saw a Mexican guy steal a TV. From that it follows that all Mexicans are lazy bastards who want to steal your nice stuff, okay? Believe me, I'm Mexican, I know. But I am. So this is the kind of misunderstanding, distortion, illogical qualities that attend to bigotry. Next, please. Okay, so let's go back to anti-Jewish animus. There are a number of very valuable definitions online and anywhere provided by scholars, by activists, by others. I want to just introduce you to one with which some of you may be familiar because I find it useful. It tends to be, it is a practical definition, one that, in a sense, argues how one can determine what and who is an anti-Semite and who isn't. So Natan Sharansky, the former prisoner of Zion, he argued for what he calls a 3D test. And you can press the 3, Marty. Demonization, delegitimization, and discrimination in the form of double standards. If one of these qualities is in evidence, then you can reasonably suspect that the purveyor of the thought, of the opinion, may harbor anti-Jewish sentiments. And in other words, that they may be bigots. Next, please. Okay, so here I have two examples about which I would like you to comment. I don't know if you can all see this. On your right is a fellow by the name of Norm Finkelstein, who used to be in the faculty of DePaul University and eventually got kicked out of DePaul University for, some kind of intellectual malfeasance. At any rate, he's made a career of writing anti-Zionist, attacks. And among the things he said are, for example, that Israel is Genghis Khan with a computer. And he's also said, quote, Israel is a satanic state. So, according to the 3D test, or according to any other definition that you wish to embrace, would you say that that is an anti-Semitic statement? This is a trick question. Anybody? Is that statement anti-Semitic?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, why?
Demonization.
Demonization. Okay, at least we see some traces of the idea that there's an entire country that is demonic, literally satanic. Okay, so that's demonization. So even if you don't call it anti-Semitic, there's some bigotry there. There's an attempt to categorize an entire group of people with the worst possible adjectives. On your right side is a couple of images that I gleaned from somebody else's presentation. It's I guess a post by a group called Jewish Voice for Peace. And basically this group is selling its merch. The t-shirt says, Israel is a garbage country that is only loved, that's only loved by garbage people. It was founded on ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and settler colonialism. Its flag is a symbol of white supremacy. And then below, on the right, there's another t-shirt that says, all Zionists are racists, every single one. Okay, another trick question. Would you say that this is a form of bigotry or even anti-Semitism?
Yes.
Anti-Semitism. Well, some people say yes, so explain yourselves. Or forever hold your peace. Tony.
It's a generalization that all people have to believe one thing and there's no diversity of thought.
Okay, there's no diversity of thought. It is a totalizing judgment. It is deeply pejorative, right? So it is hostility in one of its most obvious guises, I would say. Even if you give credence to terms like settler colonialism or to ethnic cleansing or whatever, you have to somehow allow for the possibility, if you're not going to be branded a bigot, that there's variety. That not all Israelis, not all Jews, not all blacks, Hispanics, speak with the same voice. Okay, next, please. Okay, now, we've talked a little bit about anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish animus generally. Now, what on earth is anti-Zionism? I think to answer this question, we have to answer a prior question, which is, what is Zionism, and therefore, who is a Zionist? Okay? Please, next item. Okay. As I have to say, by way of disclaimer, in my professional opinion, right or wrong, and you can take this and go and destroy it, yeah? A lot of people, even those who are pro-Israel, use the term Zionist very, very loosely and carelessly. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, maybe I'm a bit of an essentialist myself. I think, having read numerous books about Zionism, having dealt with the people in the old yeshuv who belong to the old yeshuv and so forth, I believe that a Zionist is a person who actively participates in the national renaissance of the Jewish people and its culture as both being normal in the Jewish people's ancestral homeland as a matter of human and national rights. Notice, the emphasis I put here is on active participation. In that sense, I wouldn't call myself a Zionist, strictly speaking. I call myself, full disclosure, a supporter of Zionism. Until I go to the land of Israel, or I prepare people explicitly to go there and to effectuate a renaissance of the culture in the land of Israel, I'm only a potential Zionist. That's an old-fashioned, perhaps pedantic little definition of mine. But I think that's where I'd like to start. Next, please. In real life, I think, quite apart from my own pedantry, Zionism is the support of a secular democratic nation state which counts, as it happens, with international legal legitimacy. That, by the way, is the norm. Most states in the world are nation states. Denmark is the state of the Danes. Greece is the state of the Greeks. Not that other people don't have rights, right? But for example, in Greece, the official religion of the state is Greek Orthodoxy. In Ireland, the official religion of the state is Catholicism. In England, the religion of the state is the Church of England. In Israel, the religion of the state is? No. Israel has no state religion. What it has is a series of bodies that adjudicate matters of personal status in accordance with the Ottoman system that was taken up by the Brits. Israel has no official religion. Thank you. And why do I say this as if I were the Wizard of Oz? Because people will always tell me, I don't like religious states. Well, I don't like religious states either. That's why I don't particularly care for the Islamic Republic of Iran, or at least its government. And so, wait, but Israel, you have Shabbat is Saturday. Yeah, just as in the United States, which also has no official religion, Christmas is a federal holiday. In other words, Israel is a state that, like the United States, reflects the majority of its founding generation. Now, if Israelis choose at one point or another to make Zoroastrianism the state religion of Israel, that will be their right. But until such time, we can say that this is a nation state. It's not a religious state. It is far less religious officially, institutionally, than England, Denmark, Greece, Ireland, etc. Okay, next please. Zionism, whether I like it or not, is the dominant political expression of Jewish nationality and peoplehood. It is supported, according to numerous polls, by the overwhelming majority of Jews in the world. I don't like it, tough on me. Next. Now, what is anti-Zionism, according to this definition? You might say, well, I've really stacked the deck, but follow me for a second. Next, what is anti-Zionism? It is active opposition to Zionism. It is the desire to overturn the existence of the state of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people through peaceful or forceful means. Yeah? It's as if I were to say, I don't like England. I want England to disestablish itself. I want to create a new picked republic in which, the Picts will be prominent. This will be their state, and the others will just be protected people. Will be dhimmis, let's say. Yeah. Well, essentially that's anti-Zionism. And next item, please. In real life, anti-Zionism is expressed as support for a Palestinian Arab state, for Palestinian Arab nationalism, which very often includes, depending on the anti-Zionist, includes the support for armed struggle in opposition to the state of Israel. Okay, next. Among Jews who consider themselves anti-Zionists, we see anti-Zionism as really a minority expression of what I like to call non-nationality, if not anti-nationality. In other words, it's a divesting of oneself of certain national aspects of Jewish culture as it is expressed today. Now, this can be an explicit anti-nationalism, or it can be what you might call a diasporic Jewish nationalism. In either case, the point is to exalt the diaspora as the real, natural, essential condition of Jewishness. It is to argue, for example, that the Jews are not really beholden, they don't have any genuine interest in their old homeland. That what defines a Jew is being a minority among others and living in accordance with some sort of, political or ethical code that assumes the dispersion of and the relative political powerlessness of Jews as a group. Next. Among non-Jews, especially in the left side of the political spectrum, anti-Zionism is often explicit as a political movement that seeks intersectional support toward ending Israel as Israel knows itself. And this has become very clear in recent demonstrations, right? It used to be that, in the 1980s, 1990s, to early 2000s, protesters against Israel said, well, we want the killing to end. Israel is killing too many innocent people, etc., etc. Now, in addition to those messages, we also see messages to the effect of, we don't want a Jewish state, we want 1948. In other words, we want the complete overturning, the complete relitigation of history so that there is no more state of the Jewish people. Next, among non-Jews in the extreme right, by contrast, anti-Zionism is what I perceive to be, rightly or wrongly, a relatively disorganized part of anti-Semitic rhetoric and anti-Semitic action, right? If you go to, I don't know, to some ultra-nationalist white supremacist group, you'll find that anti-Zionism is explicit, let's say, attacks on Israel as uniquely evil are mixed in with other motifs, such as, Jews are, I don't know, they're sexually deviant, or they wish to replace whites and with a bunch of mongrel races and all this other stuff. Right? So it's sort of anti-Zionism behaves as a prop to a broader racist ideology. Next. Okay. Now let's address the question with which we began. Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic? Okay. I'm going to go through 3 possible answers. Okay. They're not the only possible answers. I'm not going to tell you whether they're right or they're wrong. I'm, again, simply going to poke your brain. Go ahead. Okay. The one answer is no. No. Anti-Zionism cannot be anti-Semitism, or simply is not anti-Semitism. And why not? Okay, because, number one, self-respecting Jews are very well represented among non-Zionists and anti-Zionists. Not all Jews are Zionists. This, by the way, is accurate. Okay, next. Given their historical experience, Jews, of all people, should be especially sensitive to injustice and dispossession, especially in the case of Palestinian Arabs. Okay? So this is a moral argument, moral side of the argument. Next, Jews comprise a religious group with a prophetic and a social justice tradition that Zionism contradicts. This is part of the reading of Jewish peoplehood as something that is, let's say, ideological / theological / religious or ethical, right? Rather than national or ethnic. Next. To be Jewish means to be ethical. To be ethical means to side with the powerless. Because they support Israel and Israeli power, Zionists are, in essence, anti-Jewish. And this is indicated by the retrograde and racist elements or bases of Zionism. This is an argument that I heard articulated in one of the early meetings of the local UofA chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine. For them, Zionism is already and always, racist, and it necessitates the destruction of another people and of its dignity. Next. Criticizing Israel and Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic. Anti-Zionists are nothing but justice-driven critics who criticize Israel because they wish all Jews well and don't like the fact that Zionists speak for all Jews or try to speak for all Jews. And this is what animates the position. You don't do this in our name. What you do, Israelis, is not the Jewish position. Yeah? In fact, the real Jewish position is the position that says, to hell with Israel. Okay, next. Because it is based on Jewish nationalism, which, according to this way of thinking, runs counter to Jews' ethical religion or ethics, Zionism is inherently non-democratic and therefore un-Jewish. This is a variant of the position that I articulated above, that Judaism is essentially an ethical tradition which favors the powerless, and if one does not favor he who is designated rightly or wrongly as a powerless, then one is essentially anti-Jewish. Next. Anti-Zionism does not oppose Jews as Jews. In other words, it cannot possibly be anti-Semitic, but rather is part of a modern political movement, something that just came up lately, right? And an ideology, a political ideology at that. In other words, don't conflate being Jewish with being a Zionist. Okay? This is a very prominent part of the argument. Okay, next please. Okay, of course there are those who say, yes, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism and vice versa, because, all right, Jews have long internalized and deployed anti-Semitic notions, or anti-Jewish notions. In other words, to say that there are some Jews that are anti-Zionist simply means that they're anti-Zionist. It doesn't, or that they may have swallowed up some anti-Jewish ideas. This is true of all minorities, right? I mean, the epithet Uncle Tom is often leveled at people that, let's say, black nationalists consider to be too close to the white man. Okay, so this is one version of that idea. Okay, next. Jews Jews should not be subjected to a special standard of sensitivity. Claims that Israel has committed land theft, or genocide, or ethnic cleansing, and so forth, are specious and demonstrably false. They're invidious. In other words, they're calculated to inspire distaste and opposition, even disgust, right? This is one way of articulating the old Zionist idea that Jews deserve what everyone else deserves, that Jews are not special, that Jews can be as good or as bad as anyone else. And if Jews choose to behave in a particular way, it's because of their values. It's not because they are essentially different from anybody else. Next. Jews are people with a culture and a homeland. They are diverse. They're not a monolithic group. And attempts to to peg them to a specific interpretation of justice is reductive and a form of anti-Semitic, what you might call even positive stereotype. And this is an argument that's deployed usually against the idea that Jews who are anti-Zionist are fulfilling the prophetic tradition of the Bible. You just have to read the prophets to realize that they don't speak with one mind. Not only that, but there's not a single prophet who would give an inch of the land of Israel to organizations that are sworn to its destruction, or to the destruction of Jewish sovereignty. Read Amos, for example. If you want your hairs to stand on end, think about how Amos assails the Edomites. This is not, the cherry-picked stuff that we often hear from Isaiah. And Isaiah is pretty rough too. Go on, please. However, Jews are historically a people whose main characteristic is solidarity with one another. Jewish anti-Zionism privileges sectarian ideological uniformity over national solidarity. I've heard this argument made, for example, about the very radical ultra-Orthodox Jews who are not simply non-Zionists or who kind of live in Israel or travel to Israel. They kind of just tolerate the state, but who are decidedly anti-Israel, right? Who go to Iran to celebrate the regime of the mullahs, and who claim that, as in the first slide, that authentic rabbis cannot possibly be Zionists. This is the position of radicals who are essentially taking their own sectarian identity as primary, right? Their ideological uniformity above the principle, they're valuing it above the principle of solidarity with other Jews. Next. Biblical prophets are not monolithic, as I said before, and they're not anti-self-determination. Jewish tradition frames social justice in terms of political and social independence for Jews in the land of Israel. So when the Hebrew Bible talks about being kind to the stranger, being respectful and protective of the orphans and the widows, it is usually envisioning a Jewish state, right? The book of Deuteronomy, right? Devarim, we're going to call it Deuteronomy, is sort of a priestly précis or summary of how the society that the Israelites are going to establish as its own state in the land of Israel should run. So all this social justice is premised on Jewish independence. Next. It was different for Jews to oppose Zionism before Israel's existence, also for non-Jews to oppose Israel before its existence. Today, it's another matter. It's a recipe for Jews' political de-emancipation and even their mass murder, given the nature of Zionism's radical Muslim opponents. Okay, so in the 19th century, many Jews said, no, we don't need you crazy Zionists, we don't need your stupid dreams of gathering all the diaspora and shipping them to Israel and creating a state there. What are you, crazy? Right? Many Jews said this. Reform Jews were adamant. No, what do you mean? The best thing to do is to be part of the big melting pot of, let's say, of American society, right? It's different now. If you say no Israel, that means you have to take, 7 million Jews, and you have to tell them, sorry, it's over. If that's going to happen, let me take off my supposedly neutral hat and put on a very partisan hat. If you want to do that, and you're in the United States, ask yourself why you pay taxes in a country that's built on the bones of Native Americans and on the backs of slaves. Rather than acknowledging that you are sitting on the land of Itohona O'otam, give it the freak back. How about that? And then you preach to Jews about how they ought to deal with their history. Thank you very much. Okay, next, please. Okay, now I'm going to be rational. Sorry. I'm betraying my own irrationality. That's a problem with Zionists. You know, they contradict themselves. They're really full of hatred. That's who they really are. Okay. Anti-Zionism is not innocent criticism. It's a categorical denial of Jews' internationally recognized right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. It is discriminatory by nature because it grants Palestinian Arabs what it denies Jews and delights the violations of human rights, etc., that are at the heart of mainstream Palestinian nationalist movements and its allies. The Iranian government, the Turkish regime, which is not particularly democratic these days, and therefore anti-Zionism is comparatively silent on anti-Palestinian atrocities. So for example, when the Syrian government murders 2,000 Palestinians, there are no demonstrations at UofA, none whatsoever. And there are no similar outcries when injustices are perpetrated against Palestinians by non-Jews. The problem seems to be that Jews are the ones who perpetrate violence. Next. Okay. Left-wing progressive anti-Semitism, including the non-racist varieties, is well documented. Radical left anti-Semitism demands that Jews cede their national identity. This is going back to the likes of Marx, right, who said that the problem of society is Judaism, and so to emancipate not just the Jews but all the society, you have to get rid of Judaism. Next. Repeated polling has shown that a vast majority of the world's Jews support the existence of Israel as the Jewish people's democratic nation state. So it is not arbitrary to say that Israel represents the Jewish people, though Israel does not represent the opinions of every single Jew, just as the U.S. does not represent the opinions of every single American. Anti-Zionist groups are unelected. Israel's government, by contrast, has mass democratic legitimacy. Israel is demonstrably democratic, as are any other nation states, such as Denmark, England, Ireland, etc. Nation states form the vast majority of the countries in the world. Some are democratic, some are not. So to be a nation state is not inherently anti-democratic, is the point. Okay, next. The overall, sorry, what did I write? The overlap between blatant anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is too extensive to ignore. That overlap is telling. and distinguishing between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is a form of hair splitting meant to deflect potential guilt. Next. Okay, the third position that I'd like to sketch for you is one that was articulated recently by Anthony Julius, who's I think he's a philosopher. He gave a talk at the London School of Economics last year, and he said the following, quote, "The final retiring of the tedious pedantic arguments about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, that is, anti-Zionism in its present dominant form, is in order. They," meaning anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, "are now routes to the same lethal outcome. We can term the hatred and the malice, the threats and the violence anti-Semitism, or we can term the current version of anti-Zionism. It doesn't matter." Okay, here I have to issue, just like a good scholar, a little footnote. I think, for example, it would be very helpful if my institution, the University of Arizona, adopted some definition of anti-Semitism, because when it needs to adjudicate students or faculty who are anti-Semitic, it needs to go by that definition. So it's not as though definitions are useless or that all arguments are specious or silly or beside the point. But I think there's something, I personally feel, you may disagree, but there's something compelling about this. We live at a time when anti-Semitism is clearly exploding across the political spectrum in many walks of life. I don't think I need to give you the figures, but what we call the hatred is not that important. We know its outcomes. We know the venom that it carries, and we know the damage that it does. Okay, next. Okay, so let me just pepper you with more arguments against the idea that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, okay? Number one, Zionists conflate Judaism and Zionism. Judaism and Zionism are not the same thing. How dare you say that they're the same thing? Okay? Next. Many proud Jews are or have been non-Zionists or anti-Zionists. Okay. Next. Zionism is inherently anti-democratic, a form of Jewish suprematism. And by the way, this is a phrase that's become very, very popular in various media. It's been used by Peter Beinart here pictured. I just fear that he doesn't know that the term was first coined by none other than David Duke, who wrote a whole book called Jewish Suprematism. So if you're an anti-Zionist and you're using that phrase, do yourself a favor. Acknowledge the origin of the phrase and try to disassociate yourself from David Duke. Otherwise, the likes of yours truly will associate you with David Duke. Jewish nation statehood is inherently chauvinistic, a ghetto of self-regard, right? Jews should not be in a ghetto. Yeah? They should not just try to be amongst themselves and, oh, I, me, mine. No, they should be cosmopolitan. In fact, that's what's so great about the Jews, that they have given the world such wonderful universalists. Yeah? In fact, that is what is essential about Jewishness, argues Yuri Schleshkin in his famous book about mercurial Jews, as he puts it. So why give up on this wonderful universality? Marx, Freud, the Marx brothers. Actually, I wouldn't say that they're that universalistic, but others. I think, by the way, the Marx brothers are very Jewishly encoded. Even Chico, who's coded as Italian. Anyway, so this is the idea, right? Why do Jews want to just have their own little state? What's wrong with them? Don't they understand that? Don't they understand the song of John Lennon? That it's best if you love everybody and you love everybody equally, or the song by the Buffalo Springfield. If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Next. Israelis are serial violators of human rights. And here is where the real venom comes in. Haven't you looked at MSNBC? Don't you see what's happening? It's a disaster. That means that every single Israeli should be disenfranchised now. That's a logical conclusion, right? Next. Zionism violates the Hebrew Bible's prophetic tradition. This is a rehash of the old one. Look, the Jews have given the world this fantastic morality. It's, again, part of their universalism. It's part of what they gave to humanity through Jesus. Yes? They've spread the goodness of God. All right, next. What a majority of Jews want is not really all that important. What matters is what is moral. Okay? So it doesn't matter that a vast majority of Jews want to live a certain way. That's too bad. Yeah? It doesn't matter that all gay and lesbian and transgender people want to live the way they want to live. It's just wrong. And therefore they should be forced not to be the way they are. Next. Zionism is a Western colonialist form of politics. Zionism necessitated the destruction of another people. Can't you see? 700,000 Palestinian Arabs left or were expelled from their land. Yes? And that means that the state of Israel was created in sin and should not exist under any moral circumstances. Yes? Because, of course, the United States is a very moral country, and all states are completely blameless in every respect. In fact, when the Second World War ended, both Japan and Germany ceased to exist. Yeah? They ceased to exist. It's not like, the United States wrote their constitutions. No, that's not. No, it's over, right? So right now, when you look at the map, you don't see Japan and Germany. You see US, right? That's what happened. So that's what should happen to the Israelis. They should cease to exist. Because states are bad. Anyway, go on. Jihadi organizations that fight against Israel may have nasty tactics or methods, but they're progressive parts of the global left because they oppose Israel. So they don't really like, women's rights or things like that. They're not pluralistic or anything like that, but, they fight for the people. Israelis are not the people. The people are the good ones. So it's okay. We can ally ourselves with that. Sinwar lives. This is what some of my students are holding up in the science. Sinwar lives. Great Democrat. Anyway, Zionism is a Jewish pathology based on PTSD, fear, and ethnic animus. Yeah? PTSD. It makes Jews paranoid. It makes Jews think that there's an anti-Semite under every rock. That's what's wrong with Jews. Their idea that they've been persecuted throughout history is a fallacy. Nothing like this has ever happened. Or at least, it's been misunderstood. Go on. Israel has no legitimacy, period. This is not really an argument, it's an assertion, but it follows from all the foregoing. Next. Jews are politically ethical only in a civic democracy. Anybody, what's a civic democracy? Name a civic democracy. The United States of America. This is not an ethnic state. This is not a nation state. It's a state in which, or state of states, in which people subscribe to a particular political or civic ideology, or at least allegedly so. I dare say that I'm not sure how many people actually subscribe to it these days, but whatever. The point is that what unites Americans is not we're all, Danes or we're all Germans, we all speak a certain language that is unique to the Americans or anything like that. No, it's commitment to democratic institutions and to a certain understanding of the need to maintain those institutions, not so much by force of arms, but by force of their legitimacy, of their the respect that they receive in the lives of each and every one of us. Right? As I said, civic democracies are not the norm, they're actually quite the exception. To argue that Jews should force themselves to live under civic democracy is an interesting idea, partly because no one does other than Americans. Anyway, legitimate or authentic Jewish culture is an expression of political powerlessness, of ethical spirituality, of perpetual subalternity. It's a kind of embrace of otherness, yeah? It's because you know what it is to be under somebody's boot that you justify your existence. Okay? So these are arguments that the likes of Peter Weinert have put forward, and many other, especially Jewish anti-Zionists put forward. Next. To illustrate the point, let me give you the cases of Judith Butler, who is, I would say, nominally Jewish, and the provocateur philosopher Slavoj Žižek. Okay, so Judith Butler, as you may know, is the #1 feminist theorist, or has been for some decades. To the best of my knowledge, she didn't identify as a Jew at all until she started to write specifically against Zionism. And this is what she has written. Quote, "To be a Jew is to be departing from oneself, cast out into the world of the non-Jew. Jews can only arrive at ethical relationality, and by extension, the critique of political Zionism through the self's dispossession." Okay, this is as clear as the light of day. You have to dispossess yourself. You have to be powerless. You have to embrace powerlessness in order to be a genuine Jew. Slavoj Žižek was even more pointed. Oh, actually, let's read on Butler. Jews must disenfranchise. Actually, this is my summary of what Judith Butler is doing. Jews must disenfranchise themselves politically as a group in order to be truly and ethically Jewish. Okay, but let's look at Žižek. Very interesting, this fellow. I was once in a presentation by him at the University of Michigan, and man, people were rolling up in the aisles. Everybody was just slap happy. To put it succinctly, the only true solution to the Jewish question is the final solution, their annihilation. Because Jews are the ultimate obstacle to the final solution of history itself, to overcoming of divisions in an all-encompassing non-national unity and flexibility. Notice the use of these very pregnant terms, Jewish question and final solution. Does this remind you of anything? I mean, for me, this is pure Marx. Okay, next. The irony is that Jews sometimes stand for the stubborn attachment to their particular life form, and sometimes they stand for a homeless and rootless cosmopolitanism indifferent to all particular ethnic forms. In plain English, this means, gee, I know some Jews who are really not particularly Jewish, they're really universalists, but sometimes they seem to be kind of clannish and particularistic. Next. Perhaps this Jewish struggle is our central struggle today, the struggle between fidelity to the messianic impulse and the reactive politics of fear. Remember, Jews have PTSD, which focuses on preserving one's particular identity. Preserve your identity, that's reactionary. What you have to do is give up your identity if you're Jewish. Because I, Slavoj Žižek, I'm a very proud Moldovan. I'm unashamedly, he writes, committed to the messianic standpoint of the struggle for universal emancipation. This is universalism. Okay, next. How are we doing, by the way? I've been talking for a long time. Anybody have any complaints? You stupid! Anything like that? No, or anybody? Oh, yes, please. Oh, John.
Okay, so on the theme of anti-Zionism.
Yes. Can everybody hear?
No. I'll speak up.
Okay.
So I was curious as what your reaction would be to this. Zionism is developed as a nationalist theory in the 19th century context in which other European states were developing their sense of self.
Yes.
Marxism, of course, completely rejects that entire process.
Right.
And the question of national identity comes into severe scrutiny after Nazis, Germany, World War II, particularly in the United States.
Yes.
Isn't it therefore conceivable, I'm still manning a very terrible position, but isn't it therefore conceivable that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism for people who believe that nationalist identity shouldn't exist, period?
Okay, very good question. Very well put. So John raises a very important point, right? Particularly in the aftermath of the Second World War.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay, so I hope I can do justice to the question. So, is it possible that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism for some people who are, let's say, in principle opposed to nationalism as an evil, right? As a destructive tendency, right? Is that fair? Is that more or less what you said? Okay, well, so the answer is this. Not the answer, but an answer that I will give is the following. Certainly, there's a way to read nationalism as a political ideology that lends itself to chauvinism, right? And I don't mean sexism. I mean the idea that your kind is better than the other kinds. This is a problem of all nationalisms. It's a problem of Zionism. It's a problem of Palestinian Arab nationalism. It's a problem of American nationalism. So, is it possible that for some people, being an anti-Zionist is simply a token of being an anti-nationalist? They would say, yes, the problem comes with practice, with actual behavior. The anti-Zionists very seldom, if ever, object in any way, shape, or form to the existence of any state. What is more, they applaud and they support and they excuse radical forms of nationalism, among them Palestinian nationalism. So, in many cases, not all cases, I don't know everybody, in many cases I think the position is somewhat, shall we say, self-deluding at best, and hypocritical at worst. Yeah? There are those who say, I'm anti-nationalistic. Okay, great. Then divest yourself of your own nationality. See how that goes. Then object to the treatment of the Sami in Sweden. Then, complain when the Sudanese civil war results in the murder of hundreds of thousands. Do something other than, than receive your printed signs and your tent, your expensive tent, from the Qatari government. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna give it a personal example
Okay.
in the sense, so I'm from Norway. Leftists generally love Norway, and these anti-nationalists, anti-Zionists are very comfortable celebrating my country of Norway and not so comfortable with my country of Israel. And one of, like, either you're an anti-nationalist or you're anti one particular nation. You got to kind of choose if you celebrate Norway. Norway is famously also a nation state.
Sure.
It also has a state religion. It has all of these other things, but you will like its politics.
Right. I hope everyone has heard. I heard you perfectly. So, okay. So to play devil's advocate.
I don't think everyone heard.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So she gave the example of the point that I was trying to make, which is that many people who are against Israel in Norway still consider themselves, and I think with good reason, Norwegian patriots, and yet Norway is a nation state with an official religion and so forth. So there's a tremendous dissonance there. Did I get that right? Okay, so to play devil's advocate as a good annoying professor, I might say, well, yeah, but Norway is a very progressive state, and it allows for example, immigrants from the Middle East to come in, sometimes without documents, right? Whereas that's not possible, for example, in Saudi Arabia. And it has a very, very robust social safety net, and is undeniably democratic. While Israel, on the other side, has control, or at least partial control, over people that are not its citizens, yeah? And it can have the army go into the territories where those people live and extract fugitives, let's say. So therefore, Norway is doing better. Well, what would you guys say to that? Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Say to that, I have a different question.
Oh, it's a different question entirely. Okay, so does anybody care to answer that? I can, but okay.
Yeah. Well, Norway doesn't have a people living right on their borders who are trying to shoot Norwegians and blow up buses and pizza parlors.
Norway, do you want to
But this is precisely my point. Norway shares a Russian border.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely huge military presence on the Russian border
Sure.
for this exact same reason. Norway has an incredibly restrictive immigration policy, is pulled into the European Court for Human Rights for human rights violations all the time. These are exactly the same things that we criticize Israel for on the left, and yet the mighty Norway, the humanist beacon of the world, it does these same things. Perhaps this is not a nationalism problem, perhaps this is a problem of states sometimes are dysfunctional.
I encourage you to record this and post it for the benefit of my students. Thank you. Jamie.
As a retired teacher, I just kind of look at anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism from a
We can't hear you.
I'll repeat, don't worry, let her talk.
I look at anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism as two different definitions. Can a group, an individual, or a government be guilty of both? Absolutely. So they can overlap, but it's one or the other. So the response number 3 of it doesn't matter anymore, to those people that are one or the other, it's a disservice to them.
To them it does matter, absolutely.
It does matter.
Yeah.
That being said, when you're talking about, we are not a Jewish state, we are a Jewish state. It's just semantics. It's a Jewish homeland. Jews have more rights there than
It's a nation state.
Okay,
In that sense, it's a Jewish state.
20 to 30 Muslim countries religious states?
Some of those states, in fact, the majority of them have official religions. The PA has an official religion. The secularist Mahmoud Abbas is very clear on record as saying that the basis of PA law is Sharia. Now, I know that there are people in Israel, in the Knesset, in the cabinet, who would like Israel to be a religious state. That's why they're so adamant that this is where the country should go. The Smotrich, who is polling at 0 now, but is a very important part of the coalition, says outright, no, we should dump all these stupid secular laws and just apply halakha. That's with it. Yeah, but that he has to say that precisely because it's not a halachic state, it's not a theocracy. It is a Jewish state, but you see, I hold, unlike most American Jews that I know, that Jews are people with a culture, and that culture has some elements that are anthropologically categorizable as religion. But this is not a religion in the Christian sense of the term,
Okay.
right? So that's different.
In my opinion, to say homeland of the Jews and say it's not a Jewish state is, it just,
It's
that kind of
it's
opinion
yeah,
does not
it's
represent
semantics.
Jewish
Yeah.
people.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I would say the following: that that it is true that Jews, right, that they've established a state culture and therefore a civic society that is largely influenced by their historical experience, which has a very strong religious definition, right? That is true.
You're just proving what I just said.
Okay, no, but you see, no, there's something very important here. The Rabbanut, the official rabbinate, does not have full legal leeway. Okay, in the same way that, for example, the state-sponsored Sharia courts of Israel.
I'm not saying it's equal to the Muslim states.
No.
I'm saying
Wait,
that they're
wait.
all religious states.
Let me finish the point. So I'm saying that yes, the state acknowledges religion, it actually sponsors religion, right? But the only religion, and you might say, and it's true, that that the Jewish religion has pride of place, not only because the Jews form a demographic majority, but because they operate on the basis of their historical experience that is very different than saying that Israel has a state religion. I'm sorry, it's an institutional reality.
What about 2 million Palestinians who are allowed to practice, vote, and hold?
Yeah, as I said,
Unlike
Israel supports Christian courts and Muslim courts. There's more than one Jewish language that is the official language of the country. So it is a nation state of the Jewish people, yes? And in that sense, Jewishness, not Judaism in the strictly religious sense, is dominant, right? But I would argue that in terms of the institutions and the law, it is not a Jewish state, it's not a halachic state, it's not a theocracy. Yes?
Would Israel exist as a nation state if it was not for Judaism?
I don't use the term Judaism. I should have started differently. Where in the Hebrew Bible, where in the Mishnah, where in the Talmud do you find the term Judaism? Why am I saying this? Because it's a term that is foreign to Jews. It is a Greek term that is used by Jews to render themselves palatable and legible to non-Jews. Wait a second.
I misspoke.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Would Israel exist as a nation state if it wasn't for Jews?
Oh, of course not.
That's my, okay.
Right, of course not. I mean, Israel, the term Israel is a biblical term. It refers to an alleged forefather that then became a nation, Bnei Israel. It refers to a land that nation considers to be its inheritance, which has recently, well, actually became a monarchy, also called Israel, and then eventually became a modern state. So absolutely, without Jews, there's no Jewish state, there's no Jewish anything. But that seems, I'm wondering why you're raising the point.
I guess because we're going what
I
she
know,
was talking
I
about.
did not mean to create a speed bump. The definition
No,
of.
speed bumps are fine. No.
Well, that's not why we're here, and whether.
No,
we call
I
it a
actually
Jewish
think
state
that
or
is
not,
why we're here.
It's a matter of, whether we call it a Jewish state or not, it's a matter of opinion. And I just disagree with you, so I say so. I don't.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Debate on that. Sorry.
That's fine, Jamie, and I don't take this badly. I don't think of this as a speed bump. I think this is exactly what I had in mind when I thought about a workshop. So I'm curious why you asked the question as you have.
Because it doesn't matter if it's an official religion or not. The country wouldn't exist.
Correct, but my point is about official religion. Yeah, I think we have an issue here. In the United States, the Jews are acceptable as a religious group. When Washington wrote his famous letter to the congregation in Rhode Island, I think, he said, look, you guys have freedom of, I'm paraphrasing very badly, you guys have freedom of religion here, relax, you're gonna be okay. He didn't say, this is a multi-ethnic, mosaic. So the impact of the melting pot model of Americanism is still very strong, and Jews are again acceptable as a religious minority, but I think that does violence to their actual experience. Look, we don't speak of the, or I think anthropologists do now speak of the religion of, let's say, the Navajo, right? But if you talk to the Navajo themselves, they don't say, well, in our religion, we believe in these religious propositions, and we undertake these church-based or these, types of prayers in order to actualize those principles. No, they have a comprehensive way of life that doesn't really distinguish between a secular sphere of experience and a religious field of experience. The same is true of traditional Jewish life, which doesn't call itself Judaism. I said this in my last public talk, which was in front of a bunch of Jewish doctors. Jews, stop thinking like Christians. We're not Christians. It's not called Judaism, and it's not a religion in the Western Christian and post-Enlightenment sense of the term. It's a comprehensive culture. It's one that if you read quote-unquote Jewish religious law, what does it deal with? Weights and measures and agricultural products and, I don't know, how to handle life-giving substances like blood and sweat and semen. There's very little theology. There's no systematic theology at all. In fact, you don't have to believe a darn thing to be Jewish. If you don't believe, that's your problem. You're a bad Jew, according to some people, but you don't cease to be Jewish. Af al pi shechata Israel, although he sins, he's still Israel. Right? That's the standard definition. And you can say, for example, as Rabbi Joshua said, what is an ish Yehudi? What is a Judean man? Well, it's somebody who rejects idolatry. That's what one guy said, but the other side said, whatever. There's the same kind of ideological, doctrinal, crispness that makes Christianity such a powerful system, a system that can really sweep through the world. By the same token, Islam. Jews are very, very national, very ethnic, very parochial. Again, it's not called Judaism. Yes?
Well, the anti is hate and action because of your. So if you go with a Chai or David Starr in New York City, you may be hit. Nobody would ask you, are you pro-Israel or not? Why? It will be because you are, quote, one of them. They won't ask you. In Israel on October 7, there were Arabs in the ambulance service, and they were killed by, quote, their cousins or brothers. Nobody asked them, what's your religion? If you remember, Drew's kids were attacked and killed playing soccer on Shabbat afternoon. They were hit by the Hezbollah. They didn't check, what are you? What's your religion? So if you live in Israel, you're one of them. Now, there are people that hate Zionism, there are people that hate Jews, people that hate both, and there may be people that hate neither. But the key is hate, and hate should be fought before. You have to kill it when it's young. Everybody said in Germany, they don't mean what the Mein Kampf said.
You raise a very important point, right? Which is that no matter what people decide when they're trying to align themselves ideologically with this or that camp, reality actually functions rather differently. This is one very important point to keep in mind. To say I come across really sometimes like a ton of bricks, for which I could apologize, but I won't. And let me just say though, in a giving sort of spirit, that in reality, one does not have to either be pro-Palestinian or pro-Jewish or pro-Zionist, yeah? One can assert the rights of both peoples, and to think in dichotomous terms is rather self-defeating. I think I'm sorry to say we are way over time, so I will be really, really over time. And I want to thank you for your questions. I'm happy to answer questions.
Can I have a show of hands of if you learned something new today? Great, and I'm hoping that when thoughts were challenged, that you're going to have conversations on the way home or conversations afterwards with Dr. Graizbord. Another show of hands, we didn't finish the PowerPoint, and I don't know that we came to a conclusion. We had an excellent conversation. Would you be interested in a part two?
I think so, yes.
Okay, wonderful. A show of hands, a round of applause for Professor Graizbord.
Thank you so much, Professor Graizbord. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for learning with us. We're so glad that you are here. And because I have met a group that has some Jews in it, I want to let you know we are so glad that you are here. You are always welcome. Come back and join us for any of the number of wonderful things that we do. And we have amazing security who's keeping all of us safe, because we also have to be concerned with that. And they are going to be off the clock in a little while, so you don't have to run out. But walk out at your convenience. We're so glad that you're here. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much, Professor Graizbord. Thank you so much, Marty. Thank you for everyone who